Roll call, please.
Ms. Belisca.
Present.
Mr. Kaminsky.
Here.
Mr. DeSarno.
Here.
Mayor Morgan.
Here.
Mrs. Joffrey.
Here.
Mr. Kogan.
Here.
Mrs. McKnight.
Here.
Salute the flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's a public meeting in the Borough Council, Borough of New Providence, County of Union, State of New Jersey. Adequate notice has been given in accordance with PL 1975, Chapter 231. That an annual notice or revision was made in conformance with Section 13 of the Act. Tonight, we're going to have a presentation for the police department renovation plans. And then I want to thank you and Steve. I know you guys been working on it. Keith has been working on this with the architect, and it's been a long process. To give a little history of this, Department of Homeland Security came through and said we were woefully deficient in a lot of areas with the police department. And, you know, it's a big ticket item. We've been putting money away since 2015. Now, we had it on schedule for 2020 until COVID hit. And that's unfortunate because the building costs and supplies have gone up tremendously since then. So the cost has gone up quite a bit. But I know you came up with a lot of proposals about knocking the whole thing down, putting a new building altogether up, and like for $18,000 million, and then we just said, no, that's not gonna fly. So you've whittled this down, and I really appreciate you being very cost conscious, all of you working on this with the architect. And, you know, I'm happy to say you're giving us a presentation now so we can start moving on this project. So yours, Chief.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Council, thank you very much. As the mayor mentioned, you know, Keith Lynch, the construction official here, and our deputy administrator and Burnett have been very supportive in this process throughout the past few years. Steve Drown, probably Captain Drown, has been instrumental in going way back to 2019 and really working this forward from what you'll see in this presentation from, you know, how we got here. I have some anecdotal stuff that I just wanted to provide you with. So the building itself, the boroughs come into this building in 1982, and in 1982, Chariots of Fire won Best Picture for the Academy Awards. And Olivia Newton-John's hit Physical was the #1 song on the Billboard Top 100. Epcot Center opened in Orlando, Florida, and the Commodore 64 went on sale for a staggering $595 in 1982.
And my son was born, and that was 43 years ago.
So I didn't want to add that, but I was also 6 years old. So, this is also the year that the municipal services for the borough moved into what was formerly Lincoln School. In 1982, borough professionals allocated the space previously known to many as the school's main office, the health room, the teacher's lounge, and 2 kindergarten classrooms to the police department. The same space provided to the police department over 42 years ago has gone virtually unchanged. Over those 42 years, society has changed, and we have seen development throughout the borough and watched our community grow. Small homes have been raised and bigger spaces have been built. We've watched commercial redevelopment along Mountain Avenue, Central Avenue, and our downtown, and have changed and modernized. Technology and innovation have been welcomed throughout our community. Our borough leadership have also seen these changes and have committed to modernizing borough parks, recreation, renovated our community center, added on to the library, made upgrades to our wastewater facility, while maintaining roads and infrastructure throughout the borough. Previous borough administrations have also provided new space for our fire department, moving from what currently is Colonial Appliance to their building over on Floral Avenue, and our rescue squad, which used to be housed here in this facility and is now across the street at 7 Academy Street. With all these changes that have happened throughout society, policing is not immune from them. The department has continued to operate under cramped and outdated conditions. I'm here today to present our council and our community a plan to modernize the physical infrastructure of our department that we desperately need. So I gave you a little timeline on what we're going to see here. So as I mentioned, Lincoln School structure was originally built in 1907. We don't occupy that space. That, as many of you know, historically that space has been demolished, but the addition still exists, and that's where we exist today. Lincoln School was purchased by the borough in 1980 for a whopping sum of $1 from the Board of Education, and the borough operations moved into this building in approximately 1982. So the police wing is a little bit over 4,400 square feet. As I mentioned, the footprint hasn't changed, and there's a couple small interior renovations. Ironically, we had a couple of lavatories removed in the police department as a small renovation was needed for some office space. And then when dispatch center opened up in 2015, we just pretty much converted our dispatch area into what is currently now our record space. So there's a lot of information on this slide, but I wanted to kind of give everyone here a perspective on where we were at, and where we were, and where we're going. So as you'll see on the left, I don't have to get specific with the population, but I think we all know that the population here has grown pretty steadily from since 1990. Notably, in 2050, if you've seen the Board of Education's demographic reports, they're projecting that our population will be just over 14,500, and that is based upon the New Jersey Traffic Authority's projection based on traffic growth, not based on population growth. It's important to note that because, as you see on the bottom, there's going to be a lot of growth in this community over the next few years. We have approved through CR Bars 184 units that many people see going up as we speak. Lantern Hill will be breaking ground probably shortly in the next coming months with another 444 units. Our Spring Floral Commerce is designated for 518 units. It's conceived. Chandlin Road has been discussed as a potential to be raised, and another 104 units there. 70 Ryder Way has the potential to be 259 units, and I don't think we have to discuss what potentially could happen on Nokia, but it's definitely worth part of the conversation. Our staff, you can see our staff numbers since 1986 have grown, and we've also adapted. So as you can see, we don't have civilian dispatchers that work for us. Some of them have been supplanted by SLEO2s, both at the necessity of the court consolidation that we've done here with Berkeley Heights and Summit to help secure the court sessions that we have here on a pretty fairly regular basis. We also have converted some of those SLEO2s into school SLEO resource officers in conjunction with our SLEO3s, and our SLEO3s are primarily for the school. So as you can see, our full-time numbers have grown in conjunction with the growth of the population, and yet we're still occupying the same space that we have been. So why is it needed today? Our facility itself, and I don't have, I want to share with the public, I have to be very cognizant of security issues with showing blueprint plans of our police department. So I'll do my best to describe what we have seen, but if you can imagine, our building is shaped, if you see it over top, our portion of the building is shaped like a T, and these are the issues that we're faced with inside that little T. Our HVAC is inefficient and for cooling and heating. We are on the boiler system here in the borough, but we also utilize HVAC for heating, which just heats and cools space at the same time. Our boiler overheats the PD space because regulation is very difficult with the age of the boiler itself. And while the boiler is a great addition in really cold times, there aren't any operations after normal business hours, holidays and weekends, due to the fact that you need a black seal here in the building at the time. So plumbing is a regular issue here. Drain pipes are routinely professionally cleared, and there's drainage issues around the police building, and we have water seepage coming in back doors and into offices. We don't personally consume water in the police department. We use bottled water that's delivered to us, and I wanted to provide a picture of that, but I thought maybe that was a little over the top, so I didn't. later on in the slides. But if you could trust me on that one, I have a picture if you'd like to see it. As I mentioned about water penetration, we do see some foundational issues on our back offices, which are right outside these windows, and in a parking lot space on the back that was paved a couple years ago. There's limited parking for police purposes, for police vehicles, for impounded vehicles, for personal vehicles. We do share space with the court here in our back parking lot. It's a justifiable issue, but it's not the biggest issue, but it's an issue that we're faced with. I like to believe, because I personally have seen electrical upgrades in the police department, but our current assessment on what we utilize from an electrical standpoint is very demanding from what we needed many, many years ago. It's just with the adaptation of cameras and our radio systems and computers, we're constantly adding amperage into the police department, but yet we're getting less and less space from where we can draw from coming into the PD. Pest infestation is a real thing for us. I have to believe, because we do eat within our facility, it does cause a problem for us, more so than probably any other part of it, but we do have mice and rodent and insect infestation that are treated on a regular basis here. So what options did we explore? And I think this is really relevant to the bigger conversation as to what we're proposing. So there's a few different ideas that were proposed, and this goes back several years ago. We explored renovating the existing space, and renovating the existing space, as I mentioned, envisioning in your mind's eye that T, we thought about squaring off the building. We've discussed the possibility of expanding, for many who have just walked down this hallway into this space, expanding through the hallways and into the courtyard space. There's obviously some challenges that we have. The squaring off of the building don't necessarily provide us with the appropriate space that we need. And then we're tying into structural issues in the building itself that, as our architect mentioned, and after several meetings, I thought was an interesting point. That portion of the building was designed for school purposes, not for a police department. And in today's society, that wouldn't even be appropriate for a school, let alone a police department. So Keith can certainly speak to any questions that you may or may not have about those issues and challenges architecturally that we're up against. Not only that, but expanding into the hallway. Our courtyard space was utilized many years ago to bring our boiler system into the building. It was the only way to get it in. It now has a pretty artificial turf feel to it, but it does have a steel trap door under there that will be utilized one day to bring the boilers out without any major intrusion into the other facilities in the borough of the building. So renovating the space is a difficult thing for us. As we know, within the core of the building, the Board of Education occupies that space. The Board of Education has no intention to leave that space. They don't want to leave the space. I think that Board of Education has done, I'm sure many of you can agree with this, an excellent job at maintaining all of the spending that they've done for educational purposes, not for administration purposes. And I think that's an admirable feat that we would, asking them to leave to go find other places is now just shifting another burden onto the taxpayer, the same taxpayer that we would be asking for. Mountain Valley Communication Center occupied what was previously the rescue squad. Difficult for the public to see the space because they are very protected in there, but they align the hallway here, and they have a lease that is written to provide them the opportunity to stay here in perpetuity, as long as they need the space. I think what's really important as a landlord, right, as the borough is their landlord, is to consider the fact that they are providing a public safety service to the city of Summit and to the city of Millburn. So by disrupting those operations, we're also disrupting those communities. And quite frankly, the space that they occupy in here still wouldn't provide us with the space that we would probably totally need in a renovation space. 1 Academy Street luckily came open. If you're familiar with that, it's the old Lassus Worley or PPAC Gladstone building right across the street that faces Springfield Avenue. beautiful building. I would be the first to say that I was a big advocate of trying to get the police department into that. I thought, what a more inviting building, beautiful building, historic building to house our police department. And then quickly found out that it would cost more money just to bring it up to code than we would probably be able to do here to build new construction, which leads us to new construction. And ultimately, new construction provides many different avenues, I think, for our agency to dream what could be in the best use of space for our police department for this and this decade and the many more decades after that. So what happened next after we settled on that, right? We explored all those options. As the mayor mentioned, this was a process that really kind of took off in 2019. That's where we really we discussed the squaring off of the building that became less desirable as we realized that the cost to tie in the existing structure wasn't beneficial to the space that we were trying to accomplish. And it really just didn't provide it. What it did was it provided some additional space for us to not be so cramped, but it didn't really provide any space to function better. So as we did a spatial needs assessment back in 2020, that concept of the renovation plan was proposed, and then COVID hit. So the conversation just kind of stopped for 2 years, and it's just that simple. We resurrected it at the end of 2022 with kind of like a full court press in 2023 of trying to reimagine this space and understanding that costs were going up, interest rates were going up, and if there was a reality for us to do this, it's something that we needed to attack in the near future because those costs will only continue to go up. So what came of those plans? I can tell you, I'm not even sure how many plans I've looked at this point. But in reality, there was a 2-story proposed building that, for all intents and purposes, when we're imagining this in our mind's eye, it's occupying the same area that the building exists in now, just a slightly larger footprint. 2-story building proposed that it probably was too expensive. And I think that, as many people know, I myself am a taxpayer in this town, and I'm very conscious of what and how we spend the resources that the taxpayers in this town give us. So we came back to a 1-story building. We discussed possibly relocating the building all the way to Elkwood Avenue side, closer to Lincoln Field. There was just a lot of infrastructure issues with the coming and going of police cars onto Academy Street, getting closer to the residential neighborhoods. It may not have been the best effort to do that. Essentially, we just came back here, and the best plan proposed was a 1-story teardown of what we're in. So what do those opportunities provide with new construction, and rather than just a renovation? So our public access and municipal court access, as I mentioned, we get to streamline some of the access points. Our purpose here for both court and police are very purpose driven. People don't often come to the police department to say hi. They come here because they have to come here. And part of the issue that we are faced with, and I'm sure many of you are aware of, is the Board of Education does act as an intermediary to many of the operations with the borough on a whole, not just the police department and court. They are very disruptive to the day-to-day operations for everyone here. So our public access does give them the opportunity to pull that away from that access point and bring all those purpose-driven people to the area of the municipal center that is needed over here at the court and police department. We do see there are some things on the future that money is going to have to get spent for future expenses. The police department roof is going to have to be redone, as with other portions of the roof in the borough. There will have to be bathroom renovations done in Borough Hall, specifically outside this area. The part of the addition or the reconstruction would add new bathrooms to that area, alleviating us of a renovation need down here. Boiler replacement is probably coming soon, as Keith can probably attest to. And, if you're not aware of it, there is asbestos in this building, and there would be asbestos abatement that would be done in the police department wing, which is always a positive thing to remove those things from the workplace. Our workspace a new building will provide as our workspace to meet certain state and accreditation standards, DOC standards. I can't stress it enough to the public and to council that these are very high liability areas for the police department, whether they are for employees or persons who have to be a part of this. Prisoners, juvenile, victim access, evidence and evidence processing and arrest continuity with information being shared with our municipal and superior courts are areas that either help us win or lose cases in those courts, but they also protect victims' rights, they protect juvenile rights, they protect arrestee rights, that at this point, either we get grandfathered in or are non-compliant or are just mindful of the liability that we're faced with. The next bullet point talks about appropriate locker room and bathroom facilities, and this is one of those issues that is hard to tell the public about the conditions that our bathrooms and our locker room facilities are in, because they'll never get to utilize those spaces, and it's difficult to justify the spaces to spend money on those. But I can tell you that they are unsanitary conditions. We don't have the space that should be dedicated for changing, for decontamination, for showering, and we don't get a lot of complaints, but it's definitely an issue in the police department, has been for years and years and years. I think some positive things that we also like to discuss about a new building is meeting environmental standards and efficiency. These are future expenses that have the potential to be beneficial to the borough from an operation standpoint, from from insulation, from water usage, from HVAC usage. These are all decreased costs that we would eventually gain, that we, as I said, we heat and cool spaces now when there's nobody there. We heat and cool spaces too hot and too cold. These are all energy costs that the borough has to pay. We're not exempt from those costs. So what are some of these issues that we're faced with? I had a couple slides with a lot of pictures, and they can get a little detracting from what we're trying to accomplish here. But so I tried to take a bullet point. The picture that you're seeing right there is a combination of a locker room spillover and part of our IT room. That space that people get changed in, utilize that locker space, but has no bathroom or restroom shower facilities. But this is the space that we're occupied in. Our kitchen space does not support a 24/7, 365 thought process. Our locker rooms do not meet modern police needs for space and equipment. Our bathrooms do not accommodate the number of people that are utilizing the facility. In our workspaces, we have a very difficult time. I show this slide of our detective bureau, and you can see what's highlighted there as the picture. The detective bureau is bolded in that. This is the same space that we have officers processing information, taking interview statements. There is no sense of privacy for victims. There's no sense of privacy to work for these officers to conduct casework, because of the structure and the nature. This was, I think, room 112, the kindergarten room. And I think the administrative side, which is on the side of this wall, was room 113. We just threw up a couple walls and made do. But as you can see, it's difficult to do their jobs, to work in their jobs in the setting that we have. These are the high liability issues that I talked about. The victim confidentiality issues, the holding areas for juveniles. These are the issues that give us the most oversight, and the Attorney General has said, hey, you have to have these certain standards in order to perform your jobs. Now, I'll be the first to tell you, the Attorney General's not knocking on our door to do an inspection at the police department, but if something goes wrong, someone's going to come looking, right? Some of these other police operational issues that are a little bit more long-term are, in this photo, you're seeing what is essentially a training room, a training roll call, a meal space, and a report writing room. This is the largest space that we have in the police department. It's about 240 square feet. This is where our officers show up every day. They take their marching orders for the day from their supervisors. They write reports in this room. This is also what is our conference room, if needed. It's also the same spot that when we have our conference room needed, that somebody just had a nice seafood lunch warmed up and ate in this room about 5 minutes before. So by all means, I'm not saying that's the reason why we need to do it, but we're doing the best thing that we can do with the space that's provided, and in the shared space, that's what we have. It's the best shared space that we have, and it's the largest shared space. But on top of that, we're faced with evidence storage issues. Evidence storage is probably one of the highest liability areas because of the continuity of the evidence that we need to maintain for cases. And what we have now are disconnected spaces and opportunities for things to be missed. We do constant audits according to our accreditation standards to ensure that we're meeting those standards. But there's times when we do random audits that we find, hey, this was mislabeled, this was misplaced. The officer might have missed this in the bag when they catalog certain things. A newly designed space would provide continuity from the evidence standpoint of getting that information to the detectives. Our firearms, traffic, our storage they just don't work anymore. They're 80 to 90 square feet. They're like large closets. And just with the nature of what policing has been asked to do over all these years and the needs of how we service the community, we've just outgrown all of that space. So what does this mean? I certainly was hoping here to have this discussion about our next steps. We have a concept plan that is a one-story plan. It brings the police department so I mentioned that we're about 4,400 square feet, and we have some space spread out inside Borough Hall that adds probably another 1,100, 1,200 square feet. So in total, we're about 5,500 to 5,800 square feet for the police department. We would, with a new construction, I think we would be close to 11,000 square feet. We've sacrificed a few parking spots in the parking lot, but with the expansion of that parking lot many years ago, we actually don't utilize all the parking spaces. So in essence, we would just be pushing people closer to Elkwood Avenue in spaces that we would have. If council, and I'm sure council has many questions about what we saw here, from a projected standpoint, I'd like to continue this conversation publicly, talk about the finances behind that at a later council date, and get concurrence from council to move forward. Now, obviously this is all based upon tentative stuff, but in our discussions with the architect, it's about a 2.5-year process, right, from start to finish for us to tear down and build. Part of what we would do if council gave us the go, we would relocate over to Lassus Worley for the time being. The state allows us to do that interim. We have looked at the space. It doesn't need substantial needs for the purpose of occupy it temporarily. We would have to have some memorandums of agreement signed with our neighboring jurisdictions for holding persons for the operation of certain equipment. But those are the easy things. Essentially, though, we would be able to operate out of that space with very minor renovations to the space. Just some security issues so that we can hold people properly inside the space and really to have building security itself. And then some other things like mold remediation and all that kind of stuff. But that's maybe that could just be solved with some dehumidifiers. Yeah. That's the conclusion of what I wanted to present to you. Like I said, it's difficult. I understand probably your position and the public's position of not seeing a floor plan, but from a security standpoint, I don't want to present it, but I am very comfortable that if there was questions about the space, one of the things that we took into consideration when we did all these things was, let's build something big, right, that we would never have to come here and do a presentation to ask for again. And then when that number becomes like if to win a lottery to do that, then you start to become, okay, what do we don't need? We don't need this, or we don't need that. So the space itself doesn't really increase sizes of offices. It doesn't do all those things, but it does earmark more space for traffic. It earmarks more space for training. I can't even express to the need and the desire and the requirement for training for the police department that never existed when I started here in 2000. The training requirements on an annual and monthly basis far exceeded, I think, anybody's belief of what they. So we need dedicated training space for that. The locker room and bathroom facilities would grow large, much larger than what they are now, and they would provide the appropriate space for this modern working police department. And I think what we really tried to do was use every square inch of a footprint that was available to us. Think about where we might be in 15 or 20 or 30 years if it's scalable, and there is some scalable space that we can turn a meeting room into an office if needed. But, the nice thing about storage is, as you can see outside, we have a giant C box, and if we needed to move things out of here, we could, in order to do operational things within the police department. So, but ideally, that's what we're, the thought process between what we've developed, that we've shared with an internal group, with our administrative staff, with the staff here at Borough Hall, and really are comfortable with what we want to present here tonight. So certainly that's all I got right now. I'm sure you guys have questions. The public may have questions, but Mayor, I'll let you run the meeting from here.
You've answered all my questions because I've been through it with you time and time again. But counsel, you have any questions at this time?
Sure. First comment. It's amazing what you and your team have been doing all these years. I think the public doesn't realize how dilapidated the facilities are, and managing a lot of people. I understand morale is a big thing in managing employees. So it's amazing, and I applaud everything you've done to date to keep it all running so smoothly. And I want to thank you and Keith and everybody involved getting to this point with the design. A few questions. So your existing space, you said, is 5,400 square feet, give or take, and we're doubling or going a little bit more to 11,000 square feet, yep. Correct? The thing you've convinced me, like Al said, all the infrastructure needs have to be addressed. All of your evidence, Sally Port, everything, I'm amazed we still aren't compliant with that. But I do question the existing space that we currently have. I know you said your team has looked at the Mountain Valley space, the dispatch space and the Board of Ed. Did we just make an assumption that those are just kind of out of the question and just moved on right to the new building? Or
no. So I appreciate that. Okay. Specifically for those questions, we spoke with administration at the Board of Ed. There was some discussion initially about the Board of Ed's interest in Lassus Worley building, or in 1 Academy Street is probably a better way to put it. When you start discussing the renovation costs, the Board of Ed, I think, quickly backed off that desire. They function to the best of their ability in the space that they occupy now, and I don't think we're in any way prepared to go forward on moving out.
So I guess we didn't model, or did we model, if you had an open canvas, you had the entire building to yourself, would everything work? Or
so in the discussion of before we ever went to the board, looking at their space and essentially losing this hallway because we would have to jump through the hallway and take that space. I think with probably some bumping out, we would get closer to that 10,000 square foot mark in order to utilize that space. There's some access issues that you run into. Now, the public can't access this part of the building without coming in off Academy Street. You cut the public off from where they need to be, council from where they need, from recreation, all that kind of stuff. Not insurmountable, but it was something that we looked at.
But it seems unrealistic, knowing they can't move, I guess.
It seemed unrealistic. So the discussion happened when there was the initial phase of, hey, is this something that the Board of Ed would want? across the street. And when you start talking about it, yeah, it's something nice, but when you actually start functionally getting into the weeds of it, it seems impractical, right? And then from the Mountain Valley standpoint, that space, we looked at that space, I will say that. The discussion with the administration from both Summit and Milburn is, thanks for looking at the space, but we're not going anywhere.
Right.
You know, I can't stress enough of, you can move computers, right? They can relocate. One substantial issue that we have in this building is radio communications.
Yeah.
There is well over $1.5 million in radio communications that have been built into this facility when they occupied the space in 2015 that support not just our ability to function over the radio, but Summit and Milburn's. That by itself is an overwhelming task for them to try and get into a new facility at a cost that's probably unfeasible for those jurisdictions to spend on
Right.
when it's not in disrepair. So that would be a whole technological issue that they'd be up against, forgetting just vacating the space itself. Did I answer your questions?
Yeah, thank you. And you mentioned the courtyard space. I know you mentioned there's a boiler, access to boiler. With new construction, we're putting in a new boiler anyway.
We wouldn't. So that we would come completely off the boiler system.
You'd have your own independent one.
We would be completely HVAC. I don't think we would run off a boiler
Gotcha.
at all.
Gotcha.
And the boiler, so the boiler would still heat the space that's here.
Yeah.
Until the reductions in boiler size that they would need.
Understood.
Yeah.
So it's just access.
And I'm talking to you,
Yeah.
Councilman, and I don't even know why I'm talking about this, because you're way smarter at this stuff than because I know this is what you do.
Yeah.
So,
No, I guess what I'm saying, it is space that could be utilized. I know you have to access the boiler and whatnot, but I'm sure you guys have looked at that.
yeah, we
and-
did, and but the reality, and by all means, if you ever want to take time to look at it, roof line issues are an area because there's multiple roof line issues
Sure,
in the county,
sure.
and the space really isn't as large. It
Yeah.
doesn't, it's not, so on a
not that
plan, it
usable.
doesn't look,
It's
yeah.
not usable.
It's just not a large space, and then now you're taking windows out of facility, out of offices that look outdoors. And quite frankly, probably the most important thing, which I'm glad that you're bringing up, it's a means of egress for the Board of Education. So it's an important thing that we need to maintain for them.
No, absolutely. And I think this is a great opportunity, not just for the police, but for the entire complex.
Yeah.
It seems like, as you mentioned, there's going to be a lot of improvements, which I think is great. From a cost perspective, I know we're probably nowhere near the time talking about cost. Did renovating versus new, was that a consideration of what costs more or less, or?
So in our first, probably going back to that slide in 2019, the renovation that was discussed in 2019, 2020 was essentially just a renovation of the space. So the T would still exist.
You're not
We'd gut
adding
it,
anything.
and then we would just reconfigure it to the space. It was considered, but it doesn't, the issue that we're still up against is it doesn't add any additional square footage. It just basically realigns walls and gives us new plumbing and electrical loads and stuff like that. So without pushing out, we don't get the additional space that we need in the police department. So a renovation concept, I'd have to look back, but it ranged from $2 to $3 million. And all we just did was just make the inside of the building look nice again.
Yeah, my father used to always say, if you start with crap, you end up with crap, so
Right.
perhaps that's
That-
where
that's-
you got to.
You know, basically what we've said to the chief and the architects and Keith and Bernadette, if we're gonna do this, let's make sure we do it right and have enough available space for the
Yeah.
future. I mean, it's crazy to build something and then 2 years later, you have to add on again. So let's just do it right the first time. But when we were talking about just the renovations a few years ago, it was up to 5 to 6 million. So I know it's gone up because of building costs, are just astronomical now, so.
Yeah, no, I think the only thing I would add, and infrastructure is pretty important to me and I think to everyone, but you mentioned you're going to be upgrading the electric. I'm sure in the next 10 to 20 years, you're probably going to have an electric vehicle or two, put in enough power for charging. I think it's another opportunity for some kind of green design and look at making sure this is a state-of-the-art building if that's the direction we're going to go. But I think that's further discussions with your architectural team. Again, I don't want to come across confrontational. I just want to make sure we looked at every possible scenario, and you've kind of proven to us that you guys have done that. In the future, I do think the Lazarus Worley building, I think it's a great asset. I don't think the building should sit empty. We got to figure that out. It's a whole different discussion. And maybe you'll give us some insight once you're in there temporarily while we proceed with this project. But thank you to your team. That's all I have.
So on the Lazarus Worley building, right? I don't know if the architect's going to talk to.
One academy.
One
I'm sorry.
academy. Yeah, I know you do. Free advertising over there. I don't know if the architects are going to speak, but maybe you can, or they can, discuss the structure requirements of a police station, right? And I know that was one of the things that we were talking about with that building. And I believe you said basically the police station has to be the last building standing, pretty much in a catastrophe, right? So, I mean, maybe you can expand on that and talk about that and why. That alone really almost takes one academy out of the equation.
Certainly, and I think, Mr. Musial, this is our architect that we've been utilizing for this design plan. He can certainly, he can probably do it a little more eloquently than I can.
When you provide us that information, if you could also kind of also add not just the costs to make it into a police station, which are cost prohibitive, but also the cost to refurbish the building for regular use, I'll call it. I'd be interested to know that.
We certainly can do that. A police facility by the state of New Jersey is considered a critical facility.
Sure.
As such, we have to meet certain seismic codes and regulations. And all that, equates to money, frankly. But you have to, your steel structure itself and everything inside has to be to a seismic level that your typical office building does not have to be.
Yeah, and that's obviously important. I was asking from the standpoint of it seems as though the reason why we're not considering moving the Board of Ed or presenting them with that option is that it's cost prohibitive. I'm interested to know what would be the cost to refurbish that building so it's appropriate for other pedestrian type uses, I would say.
We haven't looked at that, but we certainly can look at that. And I'd like to know what use you anticipate, because that has an impact on how you evaluate the building.
Okay.
I mean, one step back from that, is it, Dan, you were saying like to move across the street, just a little cleanup, right, some mold remediation, but is it a significant cost to kind of move all the computer systems over to put, I know that there's actual jail cells back there because our IT people used to sit in the concrete jail cells. But what's that? Was that cost added into all of this?
There are, in some of our early estimates, there is discussion, there is moving costs associated with it. From a construction standpoint, there are biggest, so, we just outfit like a dedicated server area here in the Municipal Center for IT purposes that lacked here for a really long time. Our vendor is providing us an update on what they think it would cost to move, not to move the IT services, but just to run the capability to that building. So I know the infrastructure's there in the building. For us, it's just about fiber optics and getting it over to the building so we can maintain what we have here in the current police department without any disruption to the day-to-day operations. From the perspective of actual costs, we haven't gotten those figures. We do anticipate utilizing the space almost exactly how it exists, other than, and I know you're the most probably familiar with anybody because you worked there for so long, the main entrance off of Academy, that kind of breezeway space.
Yeah.
We would have to probably do a small renovation there just to make it inviting for the public, right? But outside of that,
Put some plants in there. You'd be fine.
there's some chairs, and then there's some security issues related to the windows around the building. But essentially, the space that exists as it looks now, outside of a coat of paint, I don't think that we would do much more to it.
Mr. Measle, how do you see the new police building looking facade-wise? Is it red brick, kind of try to fit the community?
Well,
It's too early to tell, but I'm just curious on your...
I think just simply, you wanted it to be brick, I would think, to blend in with this building, and try and get it as close to this as you can, and maybe with some cast stone and, you know, over the windows or something like that, some accents.
Thank you.
There are a
I was
couple-
hoping you would say that.
Leading the witness.
Yeah.
So do you anticipate at the next meeting that we would get into the costs and the financing and out there?
Yeah, we, certainly, the idea behind this was, I didn't want to drown out the conversation about the needs and what we're presenting with the cost, because I think that the cost is a separate conversation, right?
I think, you know,
I think that's-
we're all
I
in
think we're-
agreement
Yeah.
with the need.
Yeah.
With the need
Yeah.
in the building, and I think the next thing is the financing of it.
Yes.
And I know Jimmy's been working on that, right, Jim? Yeah, so,
Yeah, so ideally, you know, when I look at an aggressive plan, you know, with all things that we discuss, you know, I want to keep this cart moving down the road, right?
So do we.
So I would like to see another meeting where we can present formally on a council agenda with real cost discussions, and what the taxpayer would be responsible for in this, what we have allocated, as the mayor said, to offset some of those borrowing costs. But certainly, Mr. Testa is way more qualified to discuss that in conjunction with the architects designing, giving us, you know, their best estimate costs on all this design.
Bernadette, when's the next meeting? September?
September 10th, there's a conference meeting on the 24th, though.
Okay. Is that enough time?
I think so.
Just
So,
I think Chip could do it in that time.
last,
so I think I'm stating the obvious, but just for the finance part of the discussion, I think some of the expectations, at least I would have, I'm assuming a fellow council mayor would have as well, is as far as seeing, you know, the decisions that we went through, while the other ones were not applicable, and I know it was mentioned cost factors for some of it, so I'd like to, like we just talked about, the refurbishment costs of the other building for other uses, like a Board of Ed, let's say. You know, obviously, I would imagine we're going to be talking about, I know our CFO is here in attendance, but we'll be talking about, I would think, our debt schedule and the debt falling off, and why we think we have the capacity to take on additional debt, while still maintaining the important debt coverage ratios and things of that nature to assure our AAA bond rating. As well as all that in the context of our outer year, 5-year capital projects plan, which talks about anything else that we have on the horizon, such as thinking large ticket items like fire department equipment and wastewater treatment upgrade needs and things of that nature. So hopefully that's a robust conversation, because I think, obviously, listen, today, I think we're all of the opinion that if we have needs in the police department, we're the type of town that satisfies those needs immediately. I mean, we want to make sure that this police department remains, and if I'm not mistaken, you've been won awards for being one of a very select few that have, you know, certain status in the state, which is amazing, and we certainly want to, we see that as a premium in this town, and we want to maintain that. But obviously, we're just going through our due diligence right now, and I'm sure you could appreciate that. You mentioned the taxpayer's wallet a couple times. This is going to be a large expenditure for this community, so obviously we have to vet it and go through the proper due diligence along the way. So this was an excellent presentation. Thank you.
last comment I'll have on the design, and I'm only speaking from experience. So I'm happy to hear you settled on a one-story building versus two, but I just wouldn't sell yourself short. I would definitely design the building, build it for one story, but have the structural support to withstand 2 stories, so that 20 years down the road, some are people that follow us can have an opportunity to perhaps add a second floor. I know it's
We've actually done that a number of times, especially with schools, and after 20 years, there's buildings sitting there, and a lot of times they don't even realize that the building was built for a second floor, you know, because people change and move on. So.
Sure.
But it's certainly something that can very easily be done.
great.
Use the second floor for anything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
just need the money.
You took
Well, I think we're going, we'll talk about the finance piece, which meeting you want to do it?
September
24th?
24th?
It's already scheduled.
Gee, thanks, it's my birthday. You
Happy
gotta-
Birthday present.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Chief.
Noel.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for coming tonight.
Thank
Keith, you have anything?
I have nothing. I added all my wish list into the design.
Okay. Jimmy?
In the end.
No? Steve?
Tonight.
No? I just want to thank you all, a great presentation, and I'm glad to see this is going to start coming to fruition. It's like I said, we've been started on this in 15, so
Took many
you.
years to get here, so
Yeah.
it's great. Thank
it'll
you.
be done right, and that's the most important thing, so.
Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate
Great.
everybody's time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We have public comments. Anybody have any public comments? Seeing none, I declare the public comments closed. Okay, and
Adjourn this one.
Motion to adjourn.
motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
No, so be it. Okay.